The haunted amusement park. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desolate landscape of whispering pines, a forgotten town in the heart of America. Once a bustling hub of joy and laughter, it was now consumed by weeds and decay, the remnants of a vibrant community swallowed by time. Among the few attractions that remained was the old amusement park, a shadow of its former self, rumored to be haunted. The Johnson family, eager to explore the remnants of Americana, decided to take a weekend trip, hoping to create memories that would last a lifetime. Mark, the father, was a thrill-seeker at heart, always looking for the next adventure. Sarah, his wife, had a more cautious nature, but was willing to indulge her husband's whims for the sake of family bonding. Their 2 children, 10-year-old Lily and 8-year-old Ben, were filled with excitement as they packed the car with snacks, flashlights, and cameras. As the family drove towards Whispering Pines, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew thick with anticipation, the kind that sends shivers down your spine. The sky darkened, clouds swirling ominously above them. "Looks like a storm is brewing," Sarah remarked, glancing at the darkening horizon. Mark shrugged it off, his adventurous spirit undeterred. "We'll be fine. It'll just add to the thrill." Upon arriving, the park loomed in front of them, a crumbling structure tangled in overgrown vines and rusting metal. The entrance gate was partially ajar, creaking eerily in the wind. The family stepped out of the car, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. "This place is creepy," Ben whispered, clutching Lily's hand tightly. "Creepy or not, it's cool," Lily replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Mark led the way, flashlight in hand, as they ventured into the park. The once vibrant colors of the rides had faded, replaced by a dull and eerie palette. The Ferris wheel stood tall, its carriages swaying gently despite the still air, while the merry-go-round, covered in a layer of dust, seemed to whisper secrets of its past. As they explored, the family took pictures, laughing and joking to mask the underlying tension that clung to the air. However, as darkness enveloped the park, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. The wind howled, and the temperature dropped, sending chills down their spines. "Maybe we should head back," Sarah suggested, glancing around nervously. "Just a little longer," Mark insisted. "We haven't even seen the haunted house yet." He pointed towards a dilapidated building at the far end of the park, its windows shattered and door hanging off its hinges. The kids exchanged wary glances, but Mark's enthusiasm was contagious, and they pressed on. As they approached the haunted house, the wind picked up, swirling leaves around their feet. The structure loomed ominously, its shadows dancing in the flickering beam of their flashlight. "This is going to be fun," Mark exclaimed, pushing the door open with a loud creak. It swung inward, revealing a dark and dusty interior filled with cobwebs and remnants of old carnival decorations. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with a sense of foreboding. The walls were adorned with faded posters of clowns and attractions from long ago, their expressions twisted into grotesque smiles. "Let's stick together," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. They moved cautiously through the narrow hallways, the floorboards creaking beneath their feet. Suddenly a loud crash echoed from behind them, causing them to jump. "What was that?" Lily squeaked, her eyes wide with fear. Mark turned, trying to reassure them. "Probably just the wind. Let's keep going." As they reached the main room, a chill swept through the air, and the lights flickered. "This place is definitely haunted," Ben declared, his voice trembling. At that moment, a low rumble reverberated through the ground. and the family exchanged terrified glances. "Maybe we should really leave now," Sarah insisted. But before they could turn back, they heard a soft laugh echoing through the hallways, a sound that sent shivers down their spines. "Who's there?" Mark shouted, trying to sound brave. The laughter grew louder, morphing into a cacophony of whispers that filled the air around them. Suddenly the lights blazed to life, illuminating the room in a harsh glow. The family stood frozen, eyes wide as they watched in horror as the rides outside began to move on their own. The Ferris wheels spun, the merry-go-round whirled, and the sounds of laughter filled the air as if the park had come alive. "Run!" Sarah screamed, grabbing Ben's hand and pulling him towards the exit. But as they turned to flee, the door slammed shut, trapping them inside. Panic set in as the whispers grew louder, echoing in their ears. Mark pounded on the door, desperation clawing at him. "Let us out, please." The lights flickered again, and the laughter transformed into a sinister melody that seemed to mock their fear. Shadows danced along the walls, taking on twisted forms of children and carnival performers, their faces contorted in agony and despair. The family huddled together, eyes darting around the room as they searched for an escape. Suddenly, the merry-go-round burst through the wall, crashing into the haunted house, splintering wood and debris flying everywhere. "This is insane," Mark shouted, adrenaline pumping through his veins. "We need to find another way out." With no choice but to push forward, they darted down a narrow hallway. As they ran, the walls seemed to close in, the laughter growing closer. At the end of the hallway, they found a staircase leading to the upper level. "Up there," Mark shouted, leading the way as they sprinted up the stairs. They reached a landing, panting heavily, and found themselves in an old control room, filled with dusty levers and old machinery. "Maybe we can turn off whatever's controlling the rides," Mark suggested, scanning the room for anything useful. As he approached the control panel, the whispers intensified, swirling around him like a storm. "You shouldn't be here," a voice hissed, sending chills down his spine. Mark hesitated, heart racing, but he pressed on, flipping switches and pulling levers in a frantic attempt to regain control. Suddenly the laughter stopped, and an eerie silence enveloped the room. The family exchanged nervous glances, unsure of what had just happened. "Did we do it?" Sarah asked, her voice shaky. But before they could celebrate, the lights flickered and the control panel exploded in a shower of sparks. The door burst open, and the ghostly figures of children rushed in, their translucent forms filled with sorrow and rage. "You've disturbed our slumber," they wailed, their voices echoing in the confined space. The family screamed, scrambling to find a way out as the ghosts closed in on them. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Ben spotted a window at the far end of the room. "Over there!" he shouted, pointing. With no time to waste, they dashed toward the window, throwing themselves against it. As they reached out, the glass shattered, and they tumbled through, landing on the ground outside. They quickly scrambled to their feet, breathless and terrified. The park was eerily silent now, the ride still, and the shadows retreating as dawn broke over whispering pines. The family stood together, shaken but relieved to be free. "Let's get out of here," Sarah urged, looking back at the haunted amusement park, which seemed to fade into the morning light. As they drove away, the amusement park faded into the distance, a haunting memory etched in their minds. They would never forget the laughter that turned to screams, the joy that turned to terror, an adventure that had taken a nightmarish turn. Whispering Pines would remain a ghost town, its secrets buried beneath layers of time. But the Johnson family would carry the scars of their experience forever, a reminder that some places are better left undisturbed. As the Johnson family drove further from Whispering Pines, the weight of what they had experienced began to settle in. The morning sun illuminated the road ahead, but the air inside the car felt heavy with unspoken thoughts. Mark gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white as he replayed the night's events in his mind. Did that really happen? Lily finally broke the silence, her voice shaky. She stared out the window, watching the trees blur past, as if hoping to escape the memory of the haunted amusement park. It felt so real, Ben added, his eyes wide with lingering fear. Those kids, they were angry. Maybe they were just trying to protect their home, Sarah suggested softly, her heart aching for the lost souls trapped within the park. They were once like us, full of life and laughter. Mark nodded, glancing at his family. Whatever it was, we're safe now. We can't let fear control us, but we should tell someone. Maybe the town's authorities can do something about that place. As they drove, they passed through small towns and rural landscapes, but the oppressive feeling from the amusement park lingered, casting a shadow over the cheerful scenery. They stopped for lunch at a diner, but the atmosphere felt different. Even the smell of burgers and fries couldn't quell their unease. "Do you think anyone else knows what happened?" Ben asked as they sat at a booth, picking at their food. "What if we're the only ones?" "I'm sure others have gone there," Mark replied, trying to sound reassuring, but maybe they didn't survive to tell the tale. He chuckled, but it came out more nervous than humorous. Sarah looked around the diner, noticing the other patrons were engaged in their own conversations, oblivious to the haunting they had just experienced. "We should warn them," she said suddenly. "What if someone else goes there and gets hurt?" "Do you think they'd believe us?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "They'll believe us if we tell them what we saw," Mark replied, determination creeping back into his voice. "We can't let fear silence us. Let's go back to Whispering Pines and talk to whoever is in charge." After finishing their meal, they piled back into the car and drove toward the town. The closer they got, the more the air grew thick with tension. The park loomed in the distance, still shrouded in mystery and darkness. Upon reaching the town, they headed straight for the local sheriff's office. A faded sign hung above the door, and the paint was peeling, giving the building a run-down appearance. Mark took a deep breath, steeling himself for what lay ahead. Inside the sheriff, a stout man with a weary face looked up from his desk as they entered. "What can I do for you folks?" he asked, raising an eyebrow at the sight of the anxious family. We need to talk to you about the amusement park," Mark began, his voice steady, despite the pounding of his heart. "We went there last night and—" "It's dangerous," the sheriff interrupted, his expression darkening. "That place has been closed for years. We've had reports of people going missing. I'd advise you to stay away." "But we saw—" Sarah interjected, but the sheriff waved his hand dismissively. "Listen, I know what you're going to say. People have seen things there. Strange noises, lights flickering. But it's just an old park. You can't let your imagination run wild." "It's not just our imagination," Ben exclaimed, his voice rising in frustration. "We saw the rides moving, and we heard children's laughter. It's haunted, I swear." The sheriff's expression softened slightly as he studied the children's faces, but he shook his head. "I'm sorry, kids. I wish I could help, but there's nothing I can do. The town has bigger issues to deal with." Feeling defeated, the Johnsons left the sheriff's office, their spirits crushed. "What now?" Lily asked, her voice small. "We can't just give up," Mark said, his resolve strengthening. "Maybe we can find someone else who knows about the park. There must be others who have experienced what we did." As they walked through the town, they spotted an old library, its windows dusty and its door slightly ajar. "Let's check there," Sarah suggested. "Maybe there are records or old newspaper articles about the park." Inside, the smell of aged paper filled the air. They approached the librarian, an elderly woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking over her glasses with a curious expression. "We're looking for information about the amusement park," Mark said. "Anything you might have." The librarian's face turned somber. That place is a topic of many conversations, though few dare to speak of it openly. Many years ago it was a joyful spot for families, but something went horribly wrong. "What happened?" Lily asked, her curiosity piqued. The park was known for its thrilling rides and attractions, but a tragic accident occurred on the Ferris wheel. A malfunction caused it to collapse, resulting in the deaths of several children. Since then, strange occurrences have been reported, and many believe the spirits of those children haunt the park. The family exchanged glances, the weight of the past crashing down on them. "Is there any way to help them?" Sarah asked, her heart aching for the lost souls. The librarian sighed. "The only way to help is to acknowledge their presence and give them peace. Some have tried to communicate with them, but it's a dangerous game. You must tread carefully." Determined to confront their fears, the Johnsons decided to return to the park one last time, armed with the knowledge they had gained. They returned to Whispering Pines as dusk fell, the park looming like a dark specter against the night sky. This time, they brought candles, hoping to create a connection with the spirits trapped within. As they entered the park, the air felt charged, thick with energy. They made their way to the Ferris wheel, the site of the tragedy, and set the candles down in a circle. "Is anyone here?" Mark called out, his voice steady, but filled with reverence. "We're here to listen. We want to help you find peace." Silence enveloped them, the only sound the whisper of the wind through the trees. Then slowly, the wind picked up, swirling around them, and the candles flickered. Lily gasped as she saw flickering lights in the distance. "Look!" she shouted, pointing towards the carousel. The music began to play softly, a haunting melody that filled the air. "Stay close," Sarah urged, clutching Ben's hand tightly. They stepped closer to the carousel, feeling an inexplicable pull toward it. As they approached, the carousel began to spin, the figures of the horses rising and falling gracefully. The whispers returned, but this time they felt different, less menacing and more sorrowful. "Can you hear us?" Mark shouted, his voice echoing in the night. "We want to help you." The lights brightened, illuminating the area around them, and they could see the ghostly figures of children appearing on the carousel, their faces filled with longing and sadness. "Help us," one of them whispered, their voice faint but clear. "What do you need?" Sarah asked, her heart breaking at the sight of the lost souls. "Remember us," another child said, tears glistening in their ghostly eyes. "Let our story be told." With that, the family understood. They needed to share their story, to honor the memory of those lost, and ensure that the park would no longer be a place of fear, but a monument to the joy it once brought. "Your story will be told, we promise," Mark vowed. "We'll make sure everyone knows what happened here." As they spoke, the atmosphere shifted. The spirits began to smile, their forms becoming lighter, as if the weight of their sorrow was lifting. The carousel slowed, the music fading into a gentle hum. "Thank you," the children chimed in unison, their voices harmonizing beautifully. "Thank you for remembering us." With that, the lights dimmed, and the spirits began to fade, leaving behind a warm glow that enveloped the Johnsons. They felt a sense of peace wash over them, a comforting embrace that signaled the end of the haunting. As dawn broke, the family emerged from the park. Feeling lighter and more hopeful, they knew they had made a difference not only for themselves, but for the children whose laughter once filled the air. Back in their car, they drove away from Whispering Pines, the memories of the amusement park forever etched in their minds. They would share their story, turning fear into remembrance, ensuring that the joy of the past would never be forgotten. As they left the town behind, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. The haunted amusement park was no longer a place of terror, but a reminder of the importance of memory, love, and the need to honor those who had come before them. The Johnsons had faced their fears and emerged victorious, carrying with them the legacy of Whispering Pines and its lost souls, ensuring that they would never be forgotten.